Fire days are a new thing for me. Growing up, it was actually a rare event for the New York City public schools to call a snow day. I actually can only remember 2 or 3 in my entire 14-year student career in the schools. I do remember very clearly walking along Fifth Avenue in the eye of the storm of Hurricane Gloria, our one other weather-related day off of school. More recently, and likely related to climate change, those DOE students don't know how good they have it as they enjoy snow days almost every year. And I acknowledge that Hurricane Sandy was for no one a fun day off of school, but a major event with major consequences. All that being said, none of these really prepared me for receiving a text from Wise School in fall of 2017, just a few months after our return to Los Angeles. School was closed, we found out that morning, because of fire and air quality. And so I became acquainted with fire days and their eerie sunrises and sunsets. I mention those sunsets and those skies because the reality is that fire is beautiful. It is mesmerizing, even as it is dangerous and destructive. And I wonder if it is perhaps this very dichotomy that inspired our ancient sages who wrote the Midrash to use fire as one basis for understanding Abraham and Sarah's religious journey. And maybe it might inspire ours. I opened this evening with these words, Vayomer Adonai el Avram Lech Lcha, me'artzacha u'mimoladetzcha u'mibeit avicha el ha'aretz asher areka. Adonai said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." We meet Abram and Sari, they're not Abraham and Sarah yet, that comes later, the portion, at a moment of great upheaval and also a moment of great bravery. Rating barely a mention at the end of last week's Torah portion, seemingly the period in a long geological sentence, Sarai and Abram are now the main characters in our national story. And one of the enduring questions of this transition is, why them? Why are these two chosen at this moment for this moment? Rabbi Isaac in the Midrash teaches, this may be compared to a man who was traveling from place to place when he saw a birah doleket, a palace alight. Is it possible that this palace lacks a caretaker, he wondered? The owner of the palace looks out and says, I am the owner of the palace. Now, Midrash likes to compare. There's always a comparison, usually with God. And so here, Midrash says, similarly, our ancestor Abraham said, is it possible that the world lacks a caretaker? And the Holy Blessed One looked out and said to him, I am the sovereign of the universe. Hence, Rabbi Isaac teaches, God said to Avram, Lech Lcha. So there are 2 ways to read this Midrash, 2 ways to understand God's motivation and maybe Avram's as well. And these readings, a little Hebrew lesson, hinge on the understanding of this phrase, birah doleket, a palace alight. Is, as many interpreters have suggested, this birah, this palace, aflame. In this telling, Avram and Sarai stop in horror, looking on as the house in front of them is burning to the ground. To this reading, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great theologian and activist of the 20th century, suggests that Abraham and Sarah are not simply seeing a burning house, but rather a world aflame. He says, consumed by evil and bad behavior. Is it possible, he imagines them asking, that there is no one who cares? Last week, Wise's own Professor Sivan Zakai gave a talk to some of our parents entitled Parenting When the World is on Fire. She focused on strategies of how we talk to kids of different ages about different things and difficult things going on in the world, but she began by asking all of the participants what made us feel like we are parenting in a burning world. And almost immediately hands went up, and the barrage of challenges began. Lingering concerns about COVID, increased anti-Semitism, the revolution in Iran, election fears here and abroad, wildfires, war in Ukraine, you name it. From near and far, the threats of this world are real, and they can feel exhausting. And sometimes I think that we look around at this world and say, is it possible that there is no one who cares? So that's reading number one. But Heschel and others have suggested another reading, another translation or understanding of the word zoleket. And in this version, the house is not aflame, not burning down, but rather it is aglow, full of light and warmth and the coziness of a well-tended fireplace. And noticing this, Abraham and Sarah respond not from a place of fear or anger, but from a place of curiosity and wonder. This time, Heschel imagines that they ask a different question, not coming from the injustice of the situation, but rather from its beauty. How, he imagines them asking, could such marvels exist, if not by design? So I'm reminded in that translation of a story that was often told by Rabbi Marshall T. Meyer of blessed memory. When the students of a town learned that a locomotive, a train, was coming to their town for the very first time, they went and begged their teacher to take them to see it. A locomotive, the teacher asked? No. Waste of our time, we'll continue to study. Knowing they didn't want to miss out on this historic event, the students made their case every day how it would be a learning opportunity, and there was science, and there was engineering, and there was math. They begged each day until finally their teacher relented. When the day arrived, the teacher and students joined the rest of the townspeople eagerly awaiting the appearance of the train. And when it finally appeared, it did so with fanfare. Deafening noise, spewing flame, billowing smoke. And like everyone else in town, the teacher looked on in amazement. And after the train had passed and the townspeople had all returned to their regular days, the teacher still stood there, just amazed. Are you okay? The students started to ask. Teacher smiled and looked at the students and said, so what did you learn from what you saw today? And the students, they talked about the noise, and they talked about the smoke and the speed and the excitement in the air. And the teacher listened, nodding, until all the students had spoken, and then said, let me tell you what I saw. There was one car with fire in its belly, and it carried all the other cars. It only takes one car with fire to move an entire train. So is the castle on fire and burning, or is it alight? Is it aflame, or is it aglow? Or does it matter at all? Rabbi Heschel also offers the following. He writes, there are those who sense the ultimate question in moments of wonder, in moments of joy, and there are those who sense the ultimate question in moments of horror or in moments of despair. It is both the grandeur and the pain of living that makes us sensitive to the ultimate questions. My friend, Rabbi Annie Lewis, responds to Heschel by saying the following. There is truth to be found in both of these readings. I like to imagine that Avram's gift was that he saw both the beauty and the horror in the world and reached out to both, asking, who is responsible? Who could create a world of such magnificence, with the moon aglow in the sky and the trees bursting into color and the ocean churning, with a world with caterpillars and blue whales, with the light of human souls, each one entirely unique? Who is responsible? And who could create a world of such pain, where there is sickness and terrible violence and injustice, where people do all they can to be a blessing and suffer nonetheless? Who, she would ask, is responsible? So how do we respond to the ultimate question? Some of us, I think, are inspired to be courageous, to make hard choices and undertake new journeys when our world feels on fire, when we feel like maybe it is the only thing we can do. Some of us are inspired by what us Ashkenazim call a fire in our kishkas, when there is something that lights us up inside and we feel that it's the only thing we can do. But either way, this parable centers us on what we are noticing in the world and how we choose to respond and move through. Neither a house aflame nor a house aglow allow for apathy or inertia. Both require a response. Rabbi Lewis also teaches this. She says, in this parable, it is not God who makes the first move to tap Avram. Rather, Avram has a sense that there is more to the world than what appears to the eye, and he asks the question. And in that question, he creates an opening for God to enter his life. So maybe for us, the question is not about why God chose Avram and Sarah, but why they said yes. And maybe the question for us is next time you see the fire, within or without, what will you say? Shabbat Shalom.